They look at me like a shadow, a man fading, a body with a weak heart and a mind that's slipping. That's their first mistake. I'm not slipping, I'm watching. My name is Tom Whitaker, 82 years old, cane in hand, tremor in my voice when I want it there. Folks around town call me harmless, a relic in a rocking chair. My own blood calls me dead weight, and I let them, because what they don't see, they can't prepare for. I sit in the corner of my own living room, firelight dancing across walls I built with these hands, and watch my grandchildren carve me up before I'm even cold in the ground. They don't bother to whisper. They think my ears don't work. This land's prime, Mason says, swagger in his step. He's the greedy one, always has been. Every conversation circles back to money. 100 acres, developers will line up. He's already calculating, flipping soil into dollar signs. His sister, Clara, lounges across the sofa. Pretty face, sharp tongue. A liar since she could string a sentence. Grandpa will put it all in writing, she says sweetly, phone raised to record her own reflection instead of me. We'll smooth talk him into a clean handover. And then there's Ray. He doesn't speak much, but when he does, it's cruel, like a boy still pulling the wings off flies. He's pacing, muttering about how he'll gut this old house, rip out the wood, replace it with glass. People pay for modern, he says, as if my memories are wallpaper to be stripped. They think I don't hear. They think I don't care. They think I'm waiting to die. I sip my tea, make my hands tremble just enough to spill a drop on my trousers. Clara rolls her eyes. Mason laughs. Ray doesn't even look. I let them. I let every insult soak into the cracks of this old house, because silence is a weapon if you hold it long enough. But tonight, I decide it's time. I clear my throat, slow and rough. It cuts through their chatter. Kids, I say. My voice is thin but steady. They glance over, not with respect, but with that shallow patience you save for a barking dog. You've been wondering about the inheritance. That gets their attention. Phones drop, laughter dies. Mason sits forward like a hound scenting meat. Clara flicks her hair back, trying to mask the hunger in her eyes. Ray stops pacing. I've made my decision, I continue. The farm, the land, the house, the savings, all of it will be yours. They stare, caught between disbelief and triumph. Mason's mouth splits into a grin. Clara claps once, like she's already won. Ray mutters, "About time." But, I say, letting the word linger like smoke, there's a condition. The room stills. I let the silence tighten its grip, let their impatience churn. Then I lean forward on my cane and smile, a thin, knowing smile I haven't shown in years. You want what I've built, then you'll have to prove you deserve it. Clara laughs nervously. Prove? How? Through a series of tasks, I say. Tests, each one designed to show me your worth. Only if you succeed will you inherit what you're waiting for. Mason snorts. Tasks? Grandpa, we're not kids. No, I reply, my eyes locked on his. You're worse. Children take without knowing better. You take because you believe it's your right. Ray sneers. And what if we don't play along? Then you walk away with nothing. $1, not a fence post, not even the boots on my porch. The fire pops. Shadows crawl across their faces, twisting greed into unease. They don't like games where they're not holding the deck. I push myself up slowly, bones cracking, cane tapping against the floor. For a moment, I let them see the frail shell they believe in. Then I straighten, tall enough to remind them who built the roof over their heads. The first task begins tomorrow morning, I announce. You'll restore the family farm. Every board, every fence, every acre. You'll sweat for it like I once did. And I will be watching. Clara scoffs. This is ridiculous. Think of it as the price of admission, I say, heading toward the stairs. And believe me, kids, it's non-refundable. Behind me, I hear Mason whisper, he's lost it. Clara hisses, we'll fake it. Ray mutters something I can't quite catch, but the malice is clear. I climb the stairs, one slow step at a time, my cane tapping steady as a heartbeat. At the landing, I pause, glance back at them, their faces lit by fire and greed. They think it's a game. They think I'm weak. Tomorrow, they'll learn what kind of man I really am. And by the time it's over, they won't be fighting for my inheritance. They'll be fighting to survive. Morning cracked over Whitaker Farm with the same chill it always carried. Dew on the grass, a thin fog rolling off the fields, silence broken only by the crows. To me, it was music. To them, it was misery. Mason stepped onto the porch like a man heading into exile. His polished sneakers sank in the mud before he made it 3 steps. He cursed under his breath, then louder when Clara laughed. "You think this is funny?" he snapped. Clara shrugged, sipping a latte she'd dragged out of town. "It's all theater, Mason. He wants us to sweat a little, look like we care. We just play along." Ray swung the barn door open with a grunt. The hinges shrieked, metal scraping wood like the scream of something dying. He muttered, "This place should have been bulldozed years ago." I watched from the rocking chair on the porch, cane across my lap, blanket tucked over my knees. I looked like a fossil. That was the idea. "Tools are in the shed," I said, pointing with a shaky finger. They trudged off. Mason cursed when he tripped over a rusted bucket. Clara wrinkled her nose at the smell of hay. Ray kicked the door open like the farm owed him something. Inside, the equipment waited. Some of it still worked. Most of it didn't. I'd made sure of that. The tractor's engine coughed and died. The plow's bolts had been loosened, just enough to snap under pressure. The feed bags had holes chewed through by rats. They didn't know I'd been preparing this for months. Every loose nail, every rusted hinge, every brittle rope. This wasn't just neglect. It was design. By noon, the fighting started. "Push harder," Mason barked, shoving Ray at the tractor. "It's broken, you idiot," Ray shot back. Sweat ran down his neck. His shirt clung to his back. Clara leaned against the fence, scrolling her phone. "Honestly, you two look pathetic. We're supposed to be restoring, not reenacting a prison camp." I cleared my throat from the porch. "The fence isn't going to mend itself, Clara." She rolled her eyes but grabbed a hammer. The first nail bent sideways. The second snapped in half. By the third, her manicured fingers were raw and red. "Grandpa, this is impossible," she whined. "Nothing's impossible," I said, rocking slow, "just inconvenient." The animals didn't help. The old goats butted Mason every time he turned his back. The cows refused to stay in their pen. One wild rooster chased Clara across the yard, feathers flying. Ray tried to kick it. It went for his leg instead. By sunset, they were blistered, bruised, and caked in mud.
Mason stormed up to the porch, fists clenched. "This is a setup," he shouted. "You think we don't see it? The equipment's trash, the animals are rabid, the wood's rotten?" I looked him square in the eye, voice quiet. "If you can't rebuild what's broken, you don't deserve to inherit what's whole." He froze, just for a second, then turned, muttering curses into the night. Clara limped into the house with her hands wrapped in a towel. Ray slammed the barn doors so hard the old wood cracked. I sat there, rocking slow, listening to the farm breathe the way it always had. Later, when the house settled into silence, I opened the drawer of my nightstand. Inside was a small wooden box, carved decades ago. I slid it open. 3 envelopes sat inside, each with a name: Mason, Clara, Ray. Inside each envelope, a task. Not busy work, not chores. Personal tests, crafted with care. Each one aimed at the crack in their character. Mason, who never spent a dime unless it made him richer, would be asked to give. Not from my pocket, from his. Clara, who lied so often she couldn't keep her stories straight, would be forced to confess in the open. And Ray, who carried cruelty like a second skin, would be given a chance to heal the wound he'd left on another. The farm was just the warm-up. Tomorrow, the real games would begin. I closed the box, slid it back into the drawer, and turned off the light. My body ached, but my mind was sharp, sharper than it had been in years. Revenge doesn't need speed. It needs patience. Downstairs, I could hear Mason pacing, Clara crying into her phone, Ray slamming doors. The house trembled with their frustration. I smiled in the dark. They thought the farm broke them. They had no idea what was coming. I set the envelopes on the breakfast table before dawn. Mason, Clara, Ray. Each name written in bold, steady letters. My hand shook only because I let it. By the time they stumbled down, hair tangled, tempers raw from yesterday's failures, the coffee pot was already hissing. They saw the envelopes, and all 3 froze.
"What's this?" Mason asked, suspicion dripping from his voice. "Your next step," I said, stirring my oatmeal slow. "Open them." Clara snatched hers first, tearing it open like a lottery ticket. Her lips moved as she read, then her face drained of color. "You must tell the truth, publicly. You will gather 3 people you've lied to and admit what you did. If you refuse, you forfeit your claim." Her laugh was hollow. "This is insane. Grandpa, you expect me to, what, hold a press conference? Confess every little white lie I've ever told?" "Not everyone," I said, calmly. "Just the ones that matter." Ray ripped his open next, muttering. His eyes darted across the page. "You will face the person you hurt most. You will make it right. If they forgive you, you continue. If not, you are done." He crumpled the paper in his fist. "This is a joke. You're dragging up the past for what? Entertainment?" "No," I said, my gaze steady on him, "for justice." Mason opened his last. His jaw tightened before he even finished reading. "You will donate $50,000 of your own money to a charity of my choosing. Receipts required. If you cheat, I will know." 50 grand? His voice cracked with outrage. "You want me to just throw away money? My money?" "Consider it an investment," I replied. "In what?" he snapped. "In proving you're not just a vulture circling my grave." The silence after that was thick, each of them clutching their paper like it was poison. Clara was the first to break. "You can't enforce this. What, you'll cut us out if we don't play along?" "Yes."
My voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. The will is written. The conditions are binding. Fail, and you get nothing. Mason's face flushed red. You think you're clever, old man, but you forget. We know how to work around rules. We'll find a way. I leaned back in my chair, cane tapping against the floor. Try. I've already accounted for it. And I had. Months of preparation, records gathered, witnesses lined up, evidence locked away. They thought they could cheat? I was already holding the receipts. The day stretched long. Mason stormed into town, ranting about idiotic hoops. Hours later, I got a call from an old banker friend. Mason had tried to shuffle money into a dummy account to make it look like a donation. The banker sent me copies of every transfer, exactly as I expected. Clara spent the afternoon calling people, her voice low, wheedling. She invited her ex-friend Marissa over, the one she'd stabbed in the back years ago with a stolen job opportunity. I heard them in the parlor. Clara's voice syrupy sweet, full of half-truths. Marissa left 10 minutes later, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. Clara burst into tears, not repentance, frustration. Ray disappeared in his truck. I knew where he went. The town still whispered about the boy he'd beaten half to death behind the high school years ago. That boy was a man now, with scars that didn't fade. I had already spoken to him weeks earlier, told him Ray might come knocking. The man had looked me in the eye and said, he won't walk away easy. By dusk, they all dragged themselves back into the house. Mason tossed his envelope on the table. Done. Show me the receipt, I said. He smirked, waving a piece of paper. One glance told me everything. Wrong ink, wrong date, wrong account. I slid a folder across the table. Inside, copies of his real transfers. His face drained. How did you? I told you, I said, softly. I know. Clara sat down hard, mascara smudged. They won't listen. They hate me. They don't hate you, I said. They hate the lies. There's a difference. Ray didn't sit at all. He stood in the doorway, jaw clenched, fists trembling. He said he'll never forgive me, he muttered. Maybe he won't, I replied, but now you know what it feels like to be powerless. The three of them looked at me then, not with pity, not with greed, but with something sharper, fear. You planned this, whispered Mason. I smiled thin. Every step. The clock ticked on the wall, steady as a heartbeat. They shifted in their seats, realizing this wasn't a game they could win by shortcuts or charm.
Tomorrow, I told myself, would be the final push, the last test, and for the first time, they'd need each other. But trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, and I'd made sure theirs was shattered beyond repair. Morning came gray, heavy with rain. The kind of day when the sky presses down on you, making every breath feel borrowed. I let the storm roll in, perfect cover for the last test. At breakfast, I set out one envelope, only one. No names on it, just the words, together or nothing. They circled the table like wolves circling each other, each waiting for someone else to reach first. Mason snatched it open. He read aloud, voice thick with annoyance. The third test requires cooperation, a task too large for one. You must repair the North Bridge before nightfall. Only by trusting each other will you succeed. Clara groaned. A bridge? He wants us to play construction crew in the middle of a thunderstorm? Ray cracked his knuckles. He wants us to break our backs while he watches. I stirred my coffee slow. The bridge holds the road to this farm. Without it, the land's worthless. You want an inheritance? Then prove you can keep it standing. Mason slammed the envelope down. Fine, but don't think for a second we need each other to pull this off. That was his second mistake of the morning.
The first was underestimating the storm. The North Bridge was no more than a span of planks across a swollen creek, half rotten from years of neglect. I'd loosened the nails weeks ago, just enough to make the boards bow under weight. The rain had swollen the creek into a river, water clawing at the supports. They set to work grudgingly. Mason barked orders like a foreman, shouting about angles and supports he didn't understand. Clara rolled her eyes, but fetched nails, trying not to ruin her shoes in the mud. Ray worked in silence, muscles straining, every hammer strike harder than it needed to be. It should have been simple. 3 sets of hands, 1 task. But greed doesn't build bridges, it burns them. By noon, they were at each other's throats. "You're hammering wrong," Mason snapped at Clara. "At least I'm doing something," she shot back. "You've been pretending to lead while Ray does the heavy lifting." Ray dropped his hammer, chest heaving. "Both of you shut up. You think this is about boards and nails? He's testing us. He wants us to crack." I smiled from the hill above, rain dripping off my hat. Smart boy, but too late. Clara shoved Ray's shoulder. "Don't tell me what to do." Ray shoved back. The plank he stood on wobbled, split down the center, and dropped into the river. He barely caught himself on the railing. The current roared beneath him, eager to swallow him whole. Mason lunged, grabbed his brother's arm. For a moment, the 3 of them locked eyes, fear, anger, desperation twisting together. Then Mason let go. Ray dangled for a breath, then hauled himself up on his own, mud and blood streaking his face. His eyes burned into Mason's. "You dropped me?" Mason stammered. I slipped." "No," Ray hissed. "You wanted me gone." Clara backed away, palms raised. "Both of you are insane. Grandpa can't seriously expect—" Lightning cracked overhead, silencing her. The storm raged, water rising fast, bridge groaning under its own weight. They didn't finish the task. They couldn't. Not because the wood was rotten, not because the storm was cruel, but because trust was already dead. By nightfall, the bridge lay half-mended, nails bent, boards scattered. The 3 of them stood soaked, trembling, glaring at each other like enemies in a war. I stepped forward, cane sinking into the mud. My voice cut through the rain. "You failed." Mason threw his arms wide. "This was impossible from the start." "No," I said. "It was impossible for you. Because you'd rather betray than believe. You'd rather cheat than change. And now you'll pay the price." Clara's lip quivered. "What price?" I let the silence stretch, heavy as the storm itself. Then I said the words I'd been holding back since the first day they stepped foot on my porch. The inheritance doesn't go to failures. And after tonight, only one of you will have anything left to claim.
Their faces shifted, fear, shock, hunger. And in that moment, I saw the truth land like a blade. They weren't about to fight for the land anymore. They were about to fight each other. The storm swallowed my last words, but I knew they heard me. And I knew tomorrow would draw blood. They came into the house that night like wolves who couldn't agree on what to eat. Rain still clung to their hair, faces hard as river stones. Each of them had a private hunger now, and it smelled like panic. I made coffee. The steady hiss of the pot was a small mercy. They stood at the island, shoulders braced, waiting for me to smile or to stumble. Instead, I slid another envelope across the table. "Final test," I said. "Only this time the rules are simple. There's a bidder from town, someone who wants the farm intact. He will give you one last chance. He'll fund immediate repairs, but only if you produce a plan and a guarantor. You'll need the money for materials today. You have 12 hours." Mason laughed at first, that same sharp sound he used when he thought life was a ledger that always balanced in his favor. So raise the money. Easy. We split the payout, sign the papers, and he hands it over. Grandpa, you trying to embarrass us? You'll have to raise it honestly, I said. No quick loans, no fake receipts. He'll audit, he'll verify, and he won't hand a dime to liars. Clara's eyes glittered. So we prove ourselves. Bring the receipts, we get the farm. That's... She stopped. The look on her face tightened. For the first time, she considered there might be a cost. Ray spat into the sink. What's the catch? You either rebuild the farm or you walk away, I said. The choice is yours. Choice, I had learned, is the sharpest test of a person. They split and scattered like shaken leaves. Mason went to the bank, of course he did, swaggering in like confidence could buy him a signature. Clara called old contacts, sweet and poisonous, trying to wheedle loans and favors. Ray drove to the bar where men who owed him favors still drank cheap whiskey and nursed older debts. I knew where Mason would end up, because I'd been where men like him always go when they need money and think integrity is a negotiable thing, the pawn shop of short promises and long regrets. I knew where Clara would go, too. Her phone history was a map of borrowed illusions. And Ray? Well, Ray would find the one thing he feared least, a fight. By dusk, the town smelled of cold metal and desperation. Mason returned first, grinning like a man who'd already counted the cash. He slapped a black envelope on the table like a winning hand. "Investor covered us," he said. "Private lender. He takes a cut, but it's all legal. We're good." He hadn't learned the usefulness of the word legal yet. I opened the envelope. Inside, a contract. A junk mortgage, a title lien disguised as a temporary lien. Predatory terms chewed through what pride they still had. He'd signed away too much. I let the paper rest between us. "You did what?" I asked softly. "You said raise it honestly," Mason said, voice bright with denial. "I did. He's a legitimate lender." "Read it," I tapped the page, "and notice who holds the recourse." He scanned. His grin fell. The signature belonged to a shell company I'd traced months before. The lender was a paper trail that ended in a man with more teeth than conscience. If Mason signed, he'd stripped his share of control and put the farm under a lien that would last longer than any of them planned. Panic look slid across his face. "We fix it back," he stammered. "You can try," I said, "but legalese bites deeper than hammers." Clara returned with nothing but a lipstick smear on her sleeve and a borrowed smile. Her calls had yielded promises, not cash. Credit cards, will-pay-later offers, the brittle scaffolding of debt. Ray limped in last, a wet line of blood staining his jeans. His knuckles were torn, but he carried a heavy canvas bag. "What did you do?" Mason demanded. Ray set the bag down and opened it. Inside, a small, still form folded into cloth. Not alive. A dog. One of the old neighbor's hounds. A dog they'd chased off the property a month ago for snapping near the kids. They'd thought cruelty was a show of toughness. Ray had gone to acquire it for bait, a gesture meant to scare the investor into caring. The animal had panicked, broken free, and run into the road. Someone had hit it. It was that simple and that horrible. The neighbor, old Mr. Hollis, found it at the bend, stunned and not moving. They brought it back wrapped in what they could. The dog's eyes closed in the bag, as if even breath had given up on being noticed. Mason swore. Clara sobbed, the sound sharp and useless. Ray looked at his hands and saw the teeth marks not on his knuckles, but on his soul. "You're trying to tell me this?" I asked. "No," Ray said, voice small. "But we needed something to show the investor we were serious. So we scared him. I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean," Clara echoed.
the confession hung between them. I picked the cloth and laid the dog on the porch step, where the rain could wash what couldn't be fixed. Hollis came down his walk slowly, face as empty as an old wallet. He looked at them one by one, disgust moving across his features in slow, precise strokes. He used to be a friend of their grandfather.
"You boys broke more than a bridge today," he said. "You broke trust. You hurt what had a name and a family." The words landed harder than any hammer. Mr. Hollis did what small towns do when something real gets broken. He called the sheriff. He pressed the animal into the deputy's hands and told the truth without flourish. The deputy's face was the kind law wears when unpleasant things happen. Statements were taken. The investor, who prided himself on clean returns, pulled back once he learned the builders were tied to cruelty and shaky funding. Mason's lender vanished like bad credit. Clara's calls fell silent. Ray sat on the stoop and finally rocked, that same motion that had haunted me for years. By midnight, the farm had one less dog and 3 less illusions. Mason's leg gave out an hour later on the back landing, not from a fall, though he'd been close, but from the first honest pain the man had felt in years, the kind that isn't physical at first, but finds a way into the limbs later. His knee had always been bad, a secret kept beneath tailored pants and bravado. The stress, the running, the lying, the weight of contracts he could not read turned the old injury into something worse. He misstepped on the slick steps, and the joint rolled. A dull crack and a scream that wasn't pride, but purely fear. They carried him inside. The ER stitched him, set the joint, and warned. A ligament torn, mobility jeopardized without surgery. No investor would underwrite a partner who might no longer work. No lender would trust a man whose signature could be found on predatory papers. Mason sat in the chair by the stove later, leg in a brace, face the color of old coins. He had money, yes, but the kind tied up in contracts he couldn't undo. He had power, yes, but pledged away to men who did not love his name. He hungered, but the hunger was now only for what he'd thrown away. Ray's hands shook. Clara's mascara was a mask that finally slipped. They looked at each other, and for the first time in my life, I heard more than greed in their voices. I heard the brittle echo of people who had nothing left to barter but apologies they did not yet know how to mean. "Why are you doing this?" Mason whispered at last, not in anger, but in defeat. "Why make us like this?" I took my tea, sipped slow, and looked at each of them, in turn. "Because inheritance should be the end of a story, not the beginning of a disease," I said. "You tried to take a life that was shared, and you poisoned it. I wanted you to see what you are without the cheap scaffolding of entitlement." They didn't like the lesson. That is part of its mercy. When the town sleeps, the house breathes differently. I sat on the porch while rain rinsed the day's sins into the soil. Their cries and whispers drifted through open windows. Plans whispered for how to get out, for who to blame, for how to circle back. Panic makes conspiracies sound like plans. Mason will walk with a cane for months, the doctor said. Ray will wash his hands until they burn, and wonder why the blood he carries belongs to him. Clara will lie awake inventing narratives to dress her shame. And I will sleep. The game had tilted. One piece had fallen, but the board was not yet cleared. The worst changes were the slow ones, the ones that dissolve a man's edges until he cannot find his own face. Tomorrow, the second blow would come. I could almost hear it packing itself in the dark. The house grew quiet after Mason's fall. Too quiet. His cane thudded against the floorboards when he hobbled from chair to chair, cursing under his breath. His pride was broken worse than his leg. Clara avoided him. She locked herself in the upstairs room with her phone, pacing until the battery died. I could hear her through the vent, practicing apologies, rehearsing lines, trying to spin the story for an audience that no longer existed. But Ray was different. He sat by the window most nights, staring out into the dark fields like he expected something to crawl out of the earth and grab him. His hands twitched. His lips moved without sound. The dog's blood was still under his nails, even if he scrubbed till the skin cracked.
By the third day, the storm outside had passed, but the storm inside had only grown. At breakfast, Clara finally snapped. "You planned this to ruin us," she shouted at me. "Every test, every trick, none of it was fair." "Life isn't fair," I said. "That's why people show you who they really are when it gets hard." She slammed her fist against the table. "I've done everything for this family. I've carried the weight, cleaned up their messes, lied when I had to, and now—" "You lied because it suited you," I cut in. "Don't twist it into sacrifice." Her eyes filled with tears, but not the kind that heal. They were the sharp, bitter kind that demand the world bend back to your comfort. She stormed upstairs and didn't come down the rest of the day. Ray stayed at the table. His spoon trembled against the bowl. "She's not wrong," he whispered. "About what?" I asked. "About this being a setup. You wanted us broken." "No," I said. "I wanted you honest." He laughed, low and cracked. "Honest? You don't know what I've done. You don't know what I see when I close my eyes."
"I know enough," I told him. But his eyes darted, wild. He shoved back from the table so hard the chair toppled. "You think this is a game? You think—" He grabbed his hair with both hands, pulling. His voice rose to a shout. "I can still hear him, you know. That boy. Every night. He's in my head, and he won't shut up." Mason tried to calm him, but Ray swung his arm and nearly toppled his brother with the cane. Clara came running down the stairs, screaming at both of them to stop. And me? I just sat, watching the cracks split wide open. By dusk, Ray had locked himself in the shed. I heard him pacing, muttering, laughing one moment and weeping the next. Tools clattered, boards broke. When I finally peeked through the slats, he was crouched on the dirt floor, eyes bloodshot, rocking back and forth. He wasn't my grandson anymore. He was a man unraveling thread by thread. Inside the house, Clara poured herself glass after glass of whiskey from the cabinet she thought I didn't notice her raiding. Her words slurred, her makeup streaked, and she pointed at Mason with drunken fury. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You wanted it all for yourself. Admit it." Mason's face was gray with pain, sweat glistening on his forehead. "I wanted us to win," he croaked. "No," she said. "You wanted me to lose." She stumbled closer, bottle in hand, eyes bright with madness. "Maybe you should lose more than a leg." That's when I stood. My cane echoed once against the floor. The sound cut through their rage like a blade. "Enough," I said. They froze. For the first time, they looked at me not as a weak old man with shaky hands, but as the one who had orchestrated every crack, every trap, every revelation. "You think you're victims," I told them, "but you did this to yourselves. Mason's greed, Clara's lies, Ray's cruelty. I didn't invent those. I just held up the mirror." Clara's lip quivered. Mason stared at the floor. And from outside, the shed door slammed open with a howl. Ray stumbled into the yard, shirt torn, eyes wild. He carried a hammer in one hand, his knuckles raw and bleeding. "I'll fix it," he shouted to no one. "I'll fix everything." But there was nothing left to fix, only more to break. I leaned on my cane, watching them all. My family, reduced to ashes before they even touched the inheritance. The final move was coming, and when it landed, they'd finally understand the truth. There was never anything here for them to inherit but the wreckage of their own making. The farm was no longer a farm. It was a battlefield. Ray stalked the yard with that hammer like a man hunting ghosts. Mud caked his bare feet. His lips moved in whispers, prayers or curses, I couldn't tell which. Mason tried to keep him inside, but with his leg bound up, he was a broken general shouting orders from a chair no one respected. Clara drifted between them like smoke, drunk half the time, vicious the other half. I stayed in my rocking chair on the porch.
The cane tapped a steady rhythm, like a metronome marking the final measures of a song. They thought I was waiting for them to finish each other off, and maybe I was. It started with the money, always the money. Mason cornered Clara in the kitchen, his face pale, his voice tight. "You still got that stash, the rainy day fund?" Clara snorted. "If I had, you think I'd still be here?" "You're lying," he said, leaning forward. His hands gripped the table until his knuckles whitened. "You always keep something for yourself. You always—" She cut him off with a bitter laugh. "Look at you. Can't even stand without a crutch. And you want me to bankroll you?" She leaned close, venom in her whisper. "You're already half useless. Maybe Grandpa will leave the rest to me if you just fade away." Mason slapped her. Not hard, but enough. She staggered back, bottle crashing to the floor. Her eyes flared, but she didn't cry. She just smiled, a cold, twisted thing. "Careful, brother," she said. "You're not the only one who knows how to draw blood." I watched from the hall, said nothing, wrote their names down in the ledger I kept beside my chair. Not for record, for ritual. Each mark a nail in the coffin they built with their own hands. Ray's breaking point came 2 nights later. The storm inside him had grown too loud. He burst into the house past midnight, hammer raised. His shirt was shredded, his face streaked with dirt. His voice cracked like a boy's. "He's here," he said, eyes darting. "The boy. I hear him laughing. You hear him, don't you?"
Mason tried to calm him. "There's no one here, Ray. Sit down." But Ray swung the hammer against the wall, splintering wood. "Don't lie to me," he screamed. "He's out there, waiting." Clara tried another tactic. "You're scaring us," she said softly, creeping toward the door. "Good," Ray spat. "Be scared. You should be, all of you." The hammer slipped from his hand, clanging against the floor. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head, rocking like a child. His screams echoed through the house until his throat broke into sobs. And Mason just sat there, breathing heavy, realizing that even if he survived this madness, he'd never control it. The next morning, I gathered them all on the porch. They were hollow-eyed, trembling, wrecked, perfect. "This ends tonight," I said. Clara scoffed. "You don't get to decide that." "I already did," I replied. "The inheritance, the last chance, it comes down to this. One of you may yet prove yourselves, or none of you." Mason's jaw tightened. "What's the task?" I tapped my cane against the boards. "Simple. You will go into the barn together. Inside, you'll find a chest. To open it, you'll need 3 keys. Each of you holds one. You'll either work together, or you'll die trying." Their eyes flicked toward each other. Suspicion sharpened the air like knives. "And what's in the chest?" Clara demanded. "The answer," I said. Nothing more. I left them with that. Let it gnaw at their minds. Let it ferment into poison. By nightfall, the barn glowed faint under the moonlight. I watched from my window as they dragged themselves across the yard. Mason on his crutch, Clara clutching her bottle, Ray twitching like a live wire. The chest waited for them, just as I'd promised. Old wood, iron lock, heavy enough that moving it would break their backs. I saw the keys glint in their hands, saw the hesitation in their eyes. Mason growled first. "Hand it over. We open it, split it, done." Clara shook her head. "I don't trust you." Ray laughed. A thin, broken sound. "Good. You shouldn't." The barn door shut behind them. Their voices rose, shouts, curses, threats. Then a crash. Then silence. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the night swallow the noise. The chest had nothing inside but dust and old nails. Because the real inheritance was never in that barn. It was already far from their reach, signed and sealed in the name of someone who had earned it long before greed took root in my bloodline. Tomorrow, they'd know.
and the knowledge would break them worse than any hammer ever could. The screams from the barn faded into a silence thick as tar. I waited until the moon had crossed the yard, then rose from my chair. Cane steady, step deliberate, I walked across the damp grass. The barn smelled of rust and sweat. The three of them were scattered inside like broken toys. Mason sat slumped against the chest, crutch knocked out of reach. Clara crouched in the corner, hair tangled, eyes wild, whispering that the lock had laughed at her. And Ray lay on the dirt floor, chest heaving, staring at nothing. The hammer was gone, his mind with it. I looked at the chest, closed, untouched by any key. Perfect. You failed, I said quietly. Clara snapped her head up. There was nothing inside. We broke ourselves for nothing. That's the point, I told her. Mason spat blood, voice rough. You set us up. You wanted this. I stepped closer. For once, I let the tremor leave my hands. I stood straight, tall. The frail mask fell. No, I said. I wanted to see if you'd fight for each other. But all you ever did was fight each other. And that's why you'll inherit nothing. Ray laughed then, a hollow, broken laugh that scraped the air. Figures, all of this, for nothing. His eyes rolled back, and he curled into himself like a boy hiding from the dark. Clara stumbled toward me, grabbing my sleeve. Please, she begged, her voice raw. Don't do this. Give us something, anything. I shook her off. You had everything. My house, my land, my name. You could have honored it. Instead, you tried to carve it up before I was cold. So, I made sure you bled for it.
Mason's voice cracked. You don't mean this. I do. I let the silence stretch, then drew the folded papers from my coat. I tossed them onto the chest. They slid across the wood with a dry whisper. That, I said, is my will. Signed, sealed, notarized. The property, the money, the land, it's already transferred. None of it belongs to you. Their eyes widened, 3 sets of hollow mirrors. To who? Clara demanded. To someone who deserves it, I said. My neighbor, Ben Carter, the man who fixed my fence without asking, who brought me soup when I was sick, who never once asked what he'd get for it. He was kind when you were cruel, loyal when you were greedy, honest when you lied. He is my family. You are not. The words hit harder than fists. Mason's mouth opened, but no sound came. Clara dropped to her knees, sobbing. Ray stared through me like I wasn't even there. I turned, cane tapping the dirt, and walked toward the door. Wait! Clara screamed after me. You can't just leave us! I paused in the doorway, the night air spilling in, carrying the smell of rain. I already have, I said. By morning, the barn was silent. The chest still locked, the keys scattered in the dirt. Mason hobbled out first, dragging his crutch. Clara stumbled after, her face streaked, her voice gone. Ray never left the shadows. The house was mine again, quiet, whole. Later that week, Ben came by. Young man, honest eyes, calloused hands. He carried a pie his wife had baked and an envelope from the lawyer. The transfer was final. The land, the house, the savings, all his now. You sure about this, Mr. Whitaker? He asked gently. I nodded. I've never been more sure. He looked around, eyes soft with respect. I'll take care of it, I promise. I know you will, I said. When he left, I sat on the porch again. The sun dipped low, painting the fields gold. Somewhere behind me, the grandchildren packed their bags in silence. No shouting, no plotting, just the sound of defeat. They left with nothing but themselves. And that, I knew, was punishment enough. As the last car rolled down the drive, I whispered to the empty yard. They thought I was weak. They thought I was waiting to die. But I was waiting for this. I leaned back in my chair, cane resting across my lap. The farm breathed steady. The birds sang. The fields stood tall.
And I smiled. Because revenge isn't fire or fury. It's silence. It's patience. It's the last laugh echoing long after the vultures have flown. They didn't lose an inheritance. They lost me. And that's a debt they'll never pay back.